Sounds good. So, and well, yeah, thank you very much about Form, one of my favorite songs that I've written. I apologize also if you're picking up any crying baby in the background because my baby is quite tired from a lack of sleep last night. So we might be getting some of that. But yeah,
Does that mean that you're quite tired as well, or did you manage to get some sleep?
I did all right. My wife faced the brunt of it last night at least. I got a few, like I got the most important hours. We've come to learn where the most important hours lie.
What's that?
The beginning of the night, basically. If
Okay.
you can get those first like 2-3 hours, you might be okay. So
Like if you have to get up at like 3 a.m., that's like not as bad of a situation as if you're up from like 1 to 3 or something.
yeah, like if he wakes us up like within the first 2 to 3 hours of our like deep sleep, like our actual sleep, it's like you're pretty fucked for the next day. We've come to
Yeah.
learn.
Well, we're
You've
before we get into too big of a parenting podcast, maybe we can take it from the
Yeah,
top.
sure. So yeah, let me take it back. So yeah, my name is Matthew Chame. I'm from Montreal, Canada, born and raised here. And yeah, like first and foremost, I am a musician, singer, songwriter. I've been releasing music under my own name for about a decade. I went to school in business, but I kind of didn't really love school. I was in finance, kind of hated it, but still ended up working at a financial education startup here in Montreal. So, funnily enough, I started like teaching the stuff that I hated learning in some sense. But the part that I did kind of fall in love with on in that job was the startup end. This was kind of like 20, what year was this? This was like 2012, 2013, 2014. Am I getting those years correct? Is that crazy? Yeah,
Like
that's how
13
close.
years ago, 12 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds right. So obviously, like, kind of we were already in like Silicon Valley, Vogue moments, and like Medium, was a big thing around those times, like blogging and obviously social media, all these things, and just
Things are
like
going mobile. I think things are going mobile around that time too, right?
yeah, things were going mobile, correct. And like the lean startup was like a big, you know, concept and book. And so I was like really, I kind of jumped on that whole thing and got really into it. I ended up leaving that job, and one of the people who I worked with at that startup started his own digital marketing company. So I went over there with him, and so I got kind of deeper into like the whole social media marketing, Google ads, all these sorts of things, blogging, content marketing, growth hacking, all these wonderful terms that were flying high in those days. But on the side, I was always making music, but it was kind of like a hobby, and it was just like a hobby that got more and more important, leading to sort of 2017 period. I caught some lucky breaks, got on some interesting songwriting camps, funnily enough, because that comes back around in my story. But met a lot of people who were like doing things in Toronto, New York, LA, and I had only really made music with some friends, in our basement in Montreal. So it really opened my eyes to what was possible musically. And I started taking trips to LA basically in 2017 off the back of these camps. And through that grew a network there, started meeting producers that I really hit it off with, and also some people on the business side, some labels, some managers, and eventually took the leap in 2018 and actually drove across the country from Montreal to LA over a 10-day trip, which was ended up being very kind of defining trip because it led to a lot of the inspiration for the music that I made once I got to LA.
Hmm.
Started just
Can
like
I
cutting
ask
my
quickly about the trip?
Sure.
I've done a 2 week road trip myself. Is really just a really nice time. It's like such a unique thing. And I wonder like but I've also like recently I drove from Florida to the Northeast, and it's like I think if you plug in the GPS, like an 18-hour drive, and we did it in like 22, and we actually like didn't even stop over. We just did it in one day. It's like, you're just in the car all day. So there's like two different ways to do it. You can take your time, or you can max speed it, and there's everything in between. But 10 days from Montreal to LA is like, it didn't require 10 days. So did you sort of like seek out this road trip as did you expect it to be something that would be sort of meaningful, or that you wanted to sort of take your time on and enjoy, or have specific stops in mind? Like, what was
Yeah.
the, it wasn't just driving to get to LA, basically, right?
Yeah, there was definitely, I guess, like an artistic side to it. Or sort of like yeah, there was something representing like a big change that I was seeking in my life at the time. So, there was a logistic side of like I wanted a car in LA after taking trips to LA. At first I hated LA because of how big it is, and Montreal is like a fairly small city. And it took time to get used to that, but I started to realize like even like Ubering around or even renting a car got super annoying. I really wanted to have my own car. So and yeah, there's like history with the car that I own to this day. I've only owned one car, and my music, when it was more of a hobby, I used to make like a YouTube series with a friend of mine where we drove around in my car around Montreal and like freestyle rapped in the car and like dash cam filmed it. It was kind of like carpool karaoke, like 10 years before carpool karaoke.
Nice.
That was kind of like my first real foray into like a music style project. But yeah, so I had like, these, I guess,
And that's the car that you still have now?
it's a car I still have now. Right now it's sitting in my garage. Like I don't really use it very much.
How
It's
many
an old
miles are
car.
on this bad boy?
It's,
Roughly?
it's not even that crazy considering how I drove it across LA and then all around LA for 2.5 years or whatever. But it's like, I don't even think I've cracked 150. I'm
I
speaking in
mean,
kilometers
well,
though.
oh, okay.
Miles is like, yeah, I don't know the math there. It's probably
I
under
was gonna say,
100K miles.
yeah, I was gonna say, you're like, yeah, it's not too much. It's just like 150 miles. I was like, whoa, it's like a lot of, it's a big number
Right, right.
actually, but kilometers, not so much. Like it's pretty reasonable. I also don't know the conversion in my head, but like under 100 or something, basically.
I think so,
Um,
yeah.
so anyway, go ahead. So, so the road trip.
Yeah. So, yeah, from what I remember, I mean, like the things I remember about it was really, I'd just come off a breakup, was like the big thing. So I was like pulled between this relationship I had in Montreal and then like wanting to kind of go to LA and really pursue this thing, and ended up choosing the latter. And so it was kind of this like moment of significance of like this relationship ending, my new life starting, and driving across the country was like a big I guess like sort of symbolic part of that. And so I did take my time with it. I wasn't rushing. I was actually couch surfing. I was using couchsurfing.com, which my mom was not happy about. This is
Uh-huh.
like before COVID and stuff. I don't know if I would do that today.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time it was like, it was pretty awesome. Like I was met some very, very interesting people. Only had good experiences using couch surfing, at least on that leg of the trip. But I sort of got addicted to like driving around the states after that, and I did some more driving around the states, like during my sort of time in LA, and then yeah, had some bad couch surfing experiences in other parts of the states. But yeah, that first trip took my time through it, and especially on the second half when I started to like hit Colorado and through Utah, like was just so mind-bogglingly beautiful. And it was super, super inspiring. And I also have like a background in meditation. I've done some silent retreats. And so kind of being on my own in nature felt very healing. And yeah, I was kind of just like meditating through this experience, really taking in all the landscapes. And I was also listening to Bon Iver's album 22 a Million at the time. I was driving west, right? So I would hit the sunset every night for like 8 or to 10 sunsets. And whenever the sun would start setting, I would put on 22 a Million and listen all the way through. And this was, yeah, kind of also a defining sonic moment for me. I started to really fall in love with Bon Iver during that experience. And now he's like by far and away my favorite artist and has inspired a lot of my music. So yeah, for those visual and sonic reasons, that trip was like super, super inspiring.
Yeah, I can't imagine like the amount of nostalgia on that. I don't know if nostalgia is exactly the right word, but on that song, like where it just takes you back. Like I have certain songs, I mean, on that album, like I have certain songs or albums that they just immediately put me back to a specific place.
For sure.
And you listen 10 straight sunsets. I mean, that's gonna bring you back. So anyway, you get to LA. Maybe you can sort of continue with the story from there.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So then, yeah. And kind of like, you know, there's some quote that I'm going to botch completely, but it's something like if you take one step towards God, like God will take a million steps towards you or something like this,
Hmm.
that I took it as like, you know, if you take a step, like a very explicit step towards your dreams, like a lot of synchronicity will happen in
Yeah.
return. And it really felt like that when I got to LA. A lot of things fell into place that put me in like the right position to be like, okay, I'm in the right place right now to be pursuing my music. I met the right sort of people to get into a lot of rooms and start to like really cut my teeth writing with a ton of producers and songwriters, and eventually found the people who I really, really hit it off with, and then, you know, created a whole album's worth of work, if not more, with them. And then I released an album. You know, I was there. I was in LA basically until COVID, and from like late 2017, early 2018, and I released an album in 2019. I think it was October, or November 2019. So just like 4 or 5 months before COVID took over. So yeah, things were kind of like kicking along in my music career at the time, but then kind of everything got halted, you know, shows and whatnot right after my album came out.
Mm.
And I was also living in this very like 1 foot in, 1 foot out in the States. Like I had an O1 visa for my artist stuff, but I didn't have proper, you know, medical insurance or healthcare insurance in the States. And I had like my Quebec license plate on my car still, which was not cool. And so I was like, okay, I got to go back to Canada, back to Montreal during COVID, and I'll come back after the summer or something. And then of course that took our worlds by storm, and that didn't happen. And I ended up basically staying in Montreal all the way till now. But during that time, like, you know, a lot was changing for me on the music front, and a lot of, you know, I only had I had a one album record deal with that. So that was all also done at this point because I released the album. So a lot of things were kind of transitionary, and a lot of the music stuff I was doing was at least paused during COVID. So I was looking for like, what am I going to do now? Where am I going to find like some footing financially when my, you know, sort of deal, the money that I got from my deal runs out, and also like, where am I going to put my energy when like a lot of the IRL stuff has fallen, and a lot of the work I was doing in LA I can't do right now because I'm in Montreal. So I was like, writing a ton of music on my own for the first time ever. I always worked with collaborators, and now I was creating music for the first time on my own. It was actually a very prolific season in like 2020, 2021. And then I also found my way into crypto. A friend of mine who had been very early days ETH, working actually on L2s like from the start. He worked at Loopring at the time. He kind of started educating me during our sort of quarantine walks about Ethereum, and then started talking to me about NFTs, which kind of put my head on tilt. You know, that people are buying and selling these pictures, put my mind on tilt. But I started, this is what kind of kicked me down the rabbit hole and started to like really pay attention. And I jumped into like the things of the day were like music DAO. I remember, or no, sorry, DAO Records was a thing. You know, all these little DAOs happening. This is like late 2020, early 21. And then, of course, the NFT boom happened. And I just quickly found my way into the sort of Zora, Mirror, Seed Club pocket of crypto Twitter. And I really found like a home there. But I noticed there wasn't a ton of music stuff happening. You know, Catalog was starting to tease their one of one platform, but it hadn't launched yet. But I know, you know, and I joined FWB and there were musicians in there. And I really, really wanted to, I had so much energy. There was so much creative energy and curiosity pouring into me from what I was learning about crypto at that time. And I didn't know how to like funnel that energy into something productive. And so one night I opened up Discord and I started a Discord server called Songcamp. And I said, this is a place for music and the new internet to crash into each other. And I started inviting people into it from FWB, from Seed Club, from these pockets of crypto Twitter. And that sort of took off as the thing that I poured my entire waking attention into for the next couple of years, 4 years, basically leading up till now, which was basically like a collective of musicians, many who were very crypto native, others who were more crypto curious or onboarded through Songcamp. And we basically ran these collective projects with a ton of musicians. We also brought in visual artists and engineers, and we would create these like massive NFT collections together by creating music and all this other artwork and sort of storytelling and lore all through Discord, all online. And it was very successful. It went really well, both in terms of like attracting really talented artists. This is like peak pandemic era, so everyone was on the internet looking for things to do, and this solved that problem for a lot of people. Created really strong energy of community in this space, and then yeah, our NFT collections did super duper well. Like our biggest one was called Chaos, which came out in 2022, June of 22, and did 450 ETH in sales. So, over $1 million
Wow.
in today's amounts. So it was a very powerful time, very, for a lot of us. And of course the macro winds helped steer this along. But yeah, it was a very successful sort of community, and took over my life basically for a long time. And I sort of
Was this
became, yeah.
was this your first time like sort of being a founder sort of figure?
Yeah, definitely.
Because
One could say I
prior
was
to
like,
this, you were either like basically, I mean, in the early days, it sounds like you were employed like more of like the startup scene, and then you're doing more of like being an artist, and now you sort of go like founder mode.
correct. Yeah. For a while there, like it really felt like, for the first couple of years, I probably wouldn't even have called myself a founder. I would have said something more community building oriented. I was sort of the center node in this community.
Right.
And I started to notice that muscle of mine in LA actually when I started to like form a network there, and I started to see, oh, I really like throwing events, like bringing people together and having all these people crash into each other, and that sort of manifested in a much bigger and like more liquid way, you could say, with Songcamp. But yeah, it was definitely my first time being a founder with that project, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was also a lot of work and a lot of weight. It felt like I was carrying a lot of time with this community. And of course, like a lot of things and a lot of Discord servers of that period, a lot of the energy dissipated over, 20 late 22 into 2023 into 2024. It started to lose its energy. But we kept going kind of on the core team and kept iterating and pivoting ideas. Most notably, or most recently, we started building a platform, basically like a Zora client for music NFT. So a lot of the music NFT projects kind of went away, and we wanted a place for these things to exist. So we started building on top of Zora's protocols. As they updated, we would update our version, but it was basically built for music at Song.camp. Until more recently, when they kind of switched to the coins model, which I'm very happy that experiment is happening, but we decided to not keep going with the Song.camp platform at that time. There just wasn't a lot of traction on it. There's not a lot of musicians releasing in the space, so we kind of stopped putting like dev resources into that project. And so most recently, I've been like kind of looking for the next thing that I want to do in this space. And Farcaster, over the last, basically at the beginning of this year, started to really grab my attention, because it started to feel like where the community was forming that I sort of felt on crypto Twitter and Discord back in the day. This started to feel like the surface area for that community that I used to sort of, that was my canvas to build upon, it felt like. So when mini apps, or Frames V2, then mini apps got launched, I got super excited to like experiment in that realm, and that's basically what led to Acid Test. So
Right.
that's
And so
like my, yeah.
acid test, first of all, yeah, I appreciate the story. And all the different
Hope it
chapters,
wasn't
but
too long, but
no, I mean, I was interrupting all the way, so it's like, it takes the time that it takes, and we could have done 5 times longer, I'm sure, going into a bunch of different details. But it's interesting because it feels like you kind of fell into, I mean, like, I don't want to over-index on like the word founder. If you want to say creator or whatever it might be, I sort of am, I don't know, I think I tweeted or casted something like even maybe earlier today about like the difference between um, like sort of what people are calling like builders on Twitter and Farcaster
mm,
versus creators, and like they're treated as like these very different things. Like a builder is like comparable to a founder who's building some kind of like product or something, or a company, and then like a creator is like, oh, that's like more of like a artist or a content creator sort of thing. And I'm like, well, like, I don't know, I think there's a lot of overlap in those things. I remember actually I was referring in this tweet or cast to Seb over at Zapper, who
Mhm.
has done, he's built a great business with Zapper, but there's also like artistic elements with it where like he designed like sort of the way that they're using their PFP, like the default PFPs for the profiles on their platform, inspired by like Opepin by Jack Butcher, and like
Mhm.
Seb did the art himself, and like it's a super creative sort of thing for a business. Zapper, which does not immediately come to mind as sort of like an artistic thing. And so
Right.
like with Acid Test, it's very evident that you are both a builder and an artist, or whatever you want to sort of like, whatever terms you want to label on it. You're a super creative person who also knows how to get the job done and execute
Mm.
like a phenomenal app. And so this sort of seems to have come probably as like a culmination of all of the things that you did over the years at Songcamp, where like, you started as sort of just trying to build this community, but ultimately ended up like shipping software and whatever, from, you know, like you maybe, I mean, I don't know exactly how it all worked, but basically like you do an NFT mint, it goes really well. Suddenly you have some resources, you have some things that you want to build to help the community, and now you're hiring devs and then you're managing them, and like you sort of
Yeah.
accidentally fall into this role of a founder. Is that like kind of roughly right?
Yeah, that's fully right. It was definitely completely by accident and sort of just like took on a life of its own. Um, and a few things happened really. And yeah, I don't like shy away from the term founder. I like the term, and I'm enjoying the fact that I've sort of fallen into that mode. I just didn't see it at first, because it was really like, I'm just starting this Discord. We're just going to run experiments and see what happens. But
Yeah.
what happened was like they started going well, and as exactly as you said, like our ideas started to get bigger. The people who wanted to be involved got bigger, so there was more logistics, more operational aspects to it. So a team formed alongside me to build this thing. And then the other thing that happened was I started to like really get a taste for building software, like build it, like getting into not myself. Like I've never really gone deep into the code, before things like Cursor and Bolt and stuff, but I started to like paint on that canvas, and it felt so fun to build,
Hmm.
for instance, our own, like start to design our own like smart contracts for how this mint is going to work and how these NFTs are going to work and do interesting things on chain. And then also, how's this UI going to feel? So really, yeah, the design aspects, I would say, of creating software, I started to really get hooked onto, and that kind of has followed me into mini app territory, where now I'm basically like doing the designs for the first time for Acid Test, just doing it on Vercel, and then like working with devs to actually bring it to life. But that's the other part, I guess, of the founder sort of title, or the startup side, that I've really learned accidentally that I really do have like an interest in.
Yeah, it's very similar to sort of how I have been thinking about things and sort of fallen into things over the last really like year or two. And I think I have a couple things to say, so hopefully I feel like I'm going to forget one of them. But basically, the first thing is that I think there's something really nice about falling into something by accident, in that there's a lot of people out there who are founders who might have sort of, not that there's anything wrong with it, but they might have like sort of explicitly sought to become a founder because they saw some other founder, and or the just general category of like successful startup people, and they're like, man, I want to be like that. And then so they like explicitly
Mhm.
pursue that thing, and that's fine, and for a lot of them, to work out and whatnot. But when you sort of like accidentally fall into maybe like a slightly less defined role, where you are, in this case, building a mini app, but obviously, like, I feel like the term mini app, I mean, I understand why Farcaster is using it, but it's almost like it's kind of a disservice. It makes it sound like it's like sort of a lesser thing. Like it's really an app.
Right.
It could
Right.
very,
Right.
like, Acid Test can very easily be an iOS app. It
Right.
might have some sort of different elements versus what's possible in the mini app, but like it's an app. And so like, fundamentally you're building a mini app, but you're also recording the content, you're making the music, like you're on all sides here, and then you're doing the design, which like another type of founder might be more focused on like the technical side or whatever. And so like I think whenever you sort of like accidentally stumble into uh, a given role or just like sort of a day to day of what you're focusing on, what you're working on, to me that sort of signals that you're doing like what you're intended to be doing or like what you're best suited to be doing, more so because you didn't seek it out as explicitly. You sort of found it by just sort of like doing what you do and continuing to try to do like more of what you do. Like you didn't start Songcamp to start a business. You started Songcamp for like, you know, your prompt to just sort of like bring people together, you know, musicians together and whatever, and like sort of do interesting things. And then in doing those things, you're like, hey, I actually like to sort of like work on the design of this UX. I kind of like working with devs. I'm on Farcaster. I kind of think this is the future. I think this is where I can sort of find the next community that led to Songcamp, stuff like that. So I think that's really interesting. And then, yeah, on the design side, I think it's kind of interesting. Like, I basically, you know, similar to you, like I'm not technical, but I really enjoy sort of like designing an experience. I think design is sort of like upstream of everything, in my view. And I mean, maybe it's a slight over exaggeration, but even like writing, I almost consider to be an exercise in design. Placing words, you know, where they like you're sort of designing a sentence, designing a paragraph, etc. And I think like, you know, while these new AI tools do exist to enable non-technical people to code, I'm finding a lot of, you know, joy in basically not doing that. While like I understand that I can, like I built my own personal website and stuff like that, which is, you know, ridiculously simple, but I'd rather like take advantage of the fact that people who do know how to code and are technical can just be way more efficient than they used to be able to be. And so I can maybe work with one instead of like five and accomplish everything that I want to, like everything that I sort of envision for my project. And so I'm curious, like sort of what the, like, are you working, do you have like a team of devs? Are you pairing with one person, anyone else sort of like contributing in the current project with Acid Test?
Yeah. Right now, it's I'm basically working with Builders Garden, the dev team that is behind Farville. I reached out to Limon.eth on Farcaster closer to the beginning of this year when I started to like ideate on what I wanted to do. And I really wanted to like build with people who are immersed in this space if I wanted to build it on top of Farcaster. And I started to see, I actually came by Limon through like he had launched or he had released a framework for building mini apps, like basically like a starting point for devs to, you know, kind of get started quickly. I was like, oh, this looks legit. Like this looks like he knows what he's doing. And then I learned that he was behind Farville, and I was like, are you open to working on, you know, other projects? And he was very down, because then I learned he has this whole team called Builders Garden behind him in Italy, like a bunch of devs from Italy working together on Farcaster. And so, yeah, been working with them for the last couple of months, and it's been amazing to work with them. But I kind of agree with what you're saying, where now it's like the resources that devs have to do things quickly is just going up and up and up. So it allows you to kind of wield the thing to your vision that much easier, or for that much less of a cost too, which has been a lot of fun. And to go back to your point also though about kind of seeing everything as design, like I really relate to that. And I guess, you know, this word has maybe been used a bit over and over in our space, but like I really do relate to the idea of world building as the action of like designing an app, creating any sort of project, writing, be it writing words in an essay or post or story, or writing songs, have been kind of like mini worlds. And that has always been the thing that I've loved the most. And I think it's why I resonated so well with the sort of 2021, 2022 era, and why it resonated well with me is because we were really sort of immersed in this collective world building project on the internet.
Was Was this interest in world building, like, can you trace this back to like a long, because obviously it sounds like it was core to your interest in music, among other things. Was this like, it sounds like you didn't get into music because, you like playing the drums or something. It was more about, sort of the experience of a song or the experience that a song could offer or an album could offer. Is that like, and maybe it was more about, I don't know if it was everything or a lot about like sort of the lyrics, but like how you got into music in the first place. Was it like sort of a world, even if you didn't have the term for it, was it a world building thing from the beginning, do you think, or sort of a combination?
Yeah, I didn't. I at least didn't see it as that, or I couldn't have like placed the sort of words or concepts to it at the time. But I mean, my relationship with music sort of evolved out of at first me making like I fashioned myself sort of like a class clown and like jokester in basically high school. And a friend of mine started making punchline rap music, kind of what like Childish Gambino was doing
Yeah.
15 years ago. It sort of like gave us permission to like, oh, you could be funny in music. And he started doing it, and then I sort of jumped on the bandwagon and started writing in my BlackBerry at time like lyrics that were clever and funny. And so it was really an operation in like humor at first, but then through that practice, I slowly started to introduce like more real concepts in my lyrics and things that touched more intimately to my life. And it started to feel like a therapeutic act instead of like an act in humor creation.
Mm.
And that's the thing I fell in love with. And like around the same time, like melody also started to enter because I was just like kind of wrapping up to that point. So sort of like melody and vulnerability came at the same time. And that's the thing I really fell in love with. And that's what my music sort of evolved into. And then, yeah, definitely it started to become sort of more conceptual and world building when, for instance, I started to, let's say, listen to Bon Iver a lot, who I think really crafts entire worlds in his music, and his albums like take you on an entire specific journey. And I definitely attempted to do that with my album that I put out in 2019. And around these times too, like the other thing I was doing in parallel, basically after university and like starting to work and hating finance, was like, oh, I'm gonna like try and do things that I like doing instead of like just doing sort of finance school and stuff. So after college, I basically started doing music in this way, and then I also took up improv comedy, and that is an entire practice in world building. You're literally going on stage and improvising a scene with your partner and crafting worlds in real time. And I, fell deeply in love with that practice as well. So through all my sort of modes of expression, I think it has all evolved into building worlds for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of like the story on sort of falling into becoming a founder, falling into becoming a musician after starting really from a place of like comedy. And it just sounds like you've been someone for a long time who has really done a great job of noticing what you're interested in and like sort of respecting it and following it. With maybe the slight detour of like the finance thing early on
Mm.
in your career, was that like, did that feel like a detour into doing something that you didn't like, or was that the status quo up to that point, and at a certain point you decided, I'm not going to sort of do this thing that just feels like what I should be doing or what people my age do or with my major do or whatever, and like I'm going to actually start doing things that I want more?
Yeah, I think I was just like a creative person who didn't really know that that was my main thing up until that point. Like, and I didn't really, and so for those reasons, I didn't necessarily, and I think I also am like, my wife at least has diagnosed me with ADHD. So I think like school wasn't like, exactly right for me or how I'm hooked up. And so because of that, I sort of just like went along with what a lot of my friends were doing, which was they were going into like university, going into business school at university. And I did feel some level of connection to business, which has come back around.
Yeah.
And I think those are the two sort of hats that I that I've been sort of balancing ever since. Even in my music career, I was like very involved in the sort of management side of my own project, but I didn't really know. I think I was pretty lopsided through sort of high school and university of like the business side or just like the educational side, and I didn't really have this intellect, or I didn't have this intuition in terms of like my creative muscle and wanting to really, really focus my life more on that. It was actually a course in business in my school, in university, in business school. There was one class I took called, what was it called? Oh my God, I'm forgetting the name. It was something to do with like the moral side of business or the social side of it. I can't remember the name, but it was something,
Like business ethics or something.
yeah, it was something close. Yeah, something to that effect. And the only project all year was basically like, it was adjacent to basically keeping a journal. And I had not done that up until that point. Now I've been writing morning pages and keeping a journal for the last decade or something, but maybe more. But that was my favorite class of my entire university. And to the point where the teacher actually, after, getting my assignment or my journal entry, whatever, basically told me like, you should consider writing more as like something you do. And that was kind of a big moment, a big eye opener for me, that I didn't even know that was like something that I could do or that I was good at. So yeah.
Outside of music, have you done more writing?
Yeah. So in a few ways, I mean, yeah, started journaling basically every day, probably 10 or 12 years ago. I've go through waves for sure, but like pretty consistently with that practice. I'm like basically addicted to it now. I like need it. It's been tough with having a kid now to keep that morning practice up. But yeah, very important part. So that's more just like personal writing, something I don't publish. But yeah, that was another big muscle that came out and I think led to a lot of the success in Songcamp. If you remember in those days, like mirror essays were kind of like a very big selling point for projects and
Yeah.
releases and announcements and all these things. And that was super conducive to Songcamp. And yeah, actually before Songcamp, but when I was getting into crypto, and again, like I said, I had so much energy and I didn't know where to place it. I was looking for something to do. I ended up like the first thing I ever did was I wrote a blog post for my friend to post on like the Loopring blog, and he paid me in LRC, and the Loopring token was the first ever like crypto I ever made. He paid me like $100 worth of LRC or something. So my first ever transaction was on
You might be like
L2.
the only person who was like their first crypto payment was in Loopring.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think so. And then after that, I ended up getting in touch on Twitter with someone who worked at 137 PM, like Gary V's blog, and they were doing a ton of like NFT, or they were starting to try to get into more like the Web3 space when it was starting to heat up. And so I started writing for them, and I actually wrote a beginner's guide to NFTs right when the NFT moment was happening, and that post kind of blew up. And like Gary Vee had it in like his Instagram bio for like 3 weeks or something. So I sort of like my Twitter following started to like come in from that. I don't have a big following, but that's where some people came in from. So yeah, I started by writing, and then I just continued that muscle into Songcamp, and I would just like write a ton of blog posts. And I think that played a big role in helping like put Songcamp into like this brand awareness for the people it did, and led to the success of the projects we released.
Yeah,
But
it's you're good.
oh yeah, sorry. One other thing to just share on the writing front was in 2020, when I was starting to like write a ton of music on my own, and this like definitely plays into the whole world building theme a lot, it was my first time, yeah, like I said, not writing with collaborators, but writing on my own, the music part too. And so I was like, felt very, very my music in a way that other music hadn't reached that point. And I started to like have this idea of writing a story, writing basically like a novel that would be paired with an album, and songs would be related to these. It was like an anthology of like short stories, and each short
Mm,
story would be connected to a song. And I sort of did that for a while, and I had this typewriter in this sublet I was renting sort of during the pandemic, post-pandemic days, and I would like write on my typewriter every day and then like try to write a song. So I did that for a while, and I ended up like writing. I have like a stack of paper typewriter pages of these stories. I never ended up doing anything with that, but that was kind of like my first time actually trying to write something in that vein.
that's really interesting. I always think I wonder if it's something that you'll come back to basically at some point. It's always tough because like you have all of this work and um, like sort of value in this stack of papers that like I don't know about you, but I just always, unless something needs to be private, I think it's cool to like sort of make it public. Even if it's not in its final form necessarily, if you don't think it ever will, like and you think like some people might
Mm.
get something from it, it's like cool to put it out there. And not saying that like you should do that now or anything like that, but they're sort of balancing that with this difficulty, I think, to you can't like sort of put yourself back to where you were there and sort of like resume your enthusiasm for the project or something like that. It's always like you sort of have to, it feels like, finish something out and get it out when it's
Mm.
going. And some people operate differently, I think. But for me personally, like I have to finish it when it's feeling alive. Otherwise, if I leave it for too long, it starts to feel like I sort of can't revive it in a way. But the concept for that sounds super interesting. And even if it's not with, you know, what you've written previously from that chapter, if you were to revisit that concept at some point in life, I think that's a super cool idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you're saying reminds me of there's this book, Big Magic, by Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And
Mm,
but this is like a book, kind of her. It's not a fiction, or I guess Eat, Pray, Love isn't either. But it's more like her talking about writing and just creativity in general. And one of the themes, or one of the things, ideas she talks about is like, it's kind of to the effect of like, she speaks of ideas as these living things that are like
mm,
looking for a home in a person to like basically express, and that they have these sort of time spans that like you might write something and then like put it in a filing cabinet, and then when you take it out again, like that idea has actually moved on to another person, and the that energy that was there that brought it to life is no longer there.
yeah.
That sometimes I do think about that idea when I think about this. I do have a file folder called novel, like with those pages, and sometimes I do look at it and I'm like, yeah, maybe I will revive that one day. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's something with podcasts and versus audiobooks as well. This reminds me of, which is that like I started listening to audiobooks somewhat recently and I ended up sort of quitting. I've just like never really got into them. And have been into podcasts though for years. And the best way I know how to like describe why, because like I like books, I want to consume what's in them, and like it shouldn't be that different from podcasts, but basically I find that just like listening to podcasts feels alive to me, where listening to audiobooks feels dead. And it's obviously not like the content as much as it is just like you have someone reading words that have like been written, and sometimes it's the author, but most of the time it's not, and it just doesn't feel alive. Whereas I tune into a podcast and like here's people talking, and like they might as well be on stage in front of me. Like it's all live. They're listening to the other person and coming up with ideas like on the spot. And for whatever reason, like when I have nothing, I probably have some ADHD as well, to some extent at least. And so like I need sort of something to focus on, and like the reading of words on a page audio style when I have nothing else to like sort of look at or something, nothing else occupying my attention, it's like not enough. Whereas a podcast, it's somehow it is enough. And
Mm.
yeah, it just sort of reminded me of that. But speaking of sort of like I'll try to segue this a little bit. Speaking of like sort of the interesting audio formats that exist in the world, Acid Test brings a very interesting sort of format to bear. I think it's definitely one of the two like sort of best, most highly produced audio formats I've heard in the last couple of years. I mentioned the other one before it started rolling. Shout out Chick Bangs over at Higher FM, which is also a great show.
Mhm.
But basically, like I tuned into Acid Test and I was like, man, this is. I mean, it's a world in a sense, and that wasn't sort of the words that came to my mind, but it was such an experience, and like the music came in, and it was like it's hard to describe, but it was just like I was like, man, this is something different. And
Mm.
that paired with the visual experience of being in the mini app, it's like I was just like, wow, this is knocked out of the park. And I think the general sentiment was similar. Not that it necessarily has to be. I think you can often do something really great that doesn't get that much love, at least not from that many people. But I think Farcaster, it's a good enough. I love like sort of the culture and community on Farcaster, and I think it was
Mhm.
well received because it's a community that sort of shares a lot of perspective of my own. So I know we're sort of like coming up on an hour here, but if you could just sort of like introduce Acid Test and maybe we'll give people enough reasons to go and check it out if they haven't already. But I don't know if it was sort of like if that was something where you were intending to build a world from the beginning or if the inspiration for it came from somewhere else, but would love to just sort of hear how that came to be in its current form. And
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier having some sort of more recent thoughts about where it could be going.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I don't have a hard cut at the top of the hour here, so we can go. But yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for those kind words about it. That's wonderful to hear. And yeah, Acid Test has been its own journey in terms of like the idea for it. It originally started out not as a radio show or podcast style thing at all. The original idea was actually to launch an artist called Acid Test. So this kind of came out of the idea of, or just the fact that like felt like we need to run more interesting experiments with on-chain music that don't live at the sort of like horizontal sort of platform, like onboard other artists and try to like get them to, mint their music or what have you. We were trying to do that on our Songcamp platform for a bit, but I felt like I just wanted to see like an on-chain native artist going crazy, going after it. So the idea was like Acid Test would be the name of the artist. We would release music that I would help create, or I would create, and or I would bring on people to create with me, what have you. And we would have a token from day one, and we release the music as NFTs and just live, in Farcaster and Zora and all these different on-chain native apps. This was sort of where the idea started. As it developed, like I even started building the mini app with Builder's Garden under that pretense. That's why if you actually see the URLs to the episodes, it's like /song. So it started out as this artist project. And so as we were building the app and I was developing also the brand for it, I was also making music. I worked with a few people, some collaborators of mine back in LA, some Songcamp alumni, and then stuff on my own. And it was trying to go in like an electronic direction, which is not my main artist project. Music that I've worked on for years has been more, kind of indie pop or like folk pop things. And so I was trying to like create this sound, and it was actually named Acid Test because I was starting from a place of like acid house. And as I was like developing the whole project, I just felt like the music, I wasn't getting to a place that I felt like really inspired by the music, A. And then B, I was starting to feel like I want to create something that feels more community oriented, more interactive, less just like one to many, hey, here's the music, come mint it and be the audience for it, but like something that involved people more directly and sort of probably some of the energy that I was missing from earlier Songcamp days. And so that's where this like radio show started to develop out of, where I was like, oh, I could actually speak to people in this space who are doing interesting things. I could bring, curate music from people in crypto or sort of like help people discover new musicians through this space, through my just like music, my network of musicians. And so I started to get excited by that idea. And it also reduced the pressure to feel like, oh, I need to like find this completely unique new sound of this musical artist, which also
It's just
felt
too
like, yeah,
it's just too hard to force that, basically. That, even though that is the original intention, it's, if it's not
correct.
there, it's like sort of not there. But the combination of pulling these different pieces together was much more organic feeling.
Yeah, it's like I kept trying to make, when I was working on this stuff on my own, for the most part, I kept trying to make these like electronic things, but exactly, it was like contrived. I would end up honestly just making things that are my natural mode, which like fit closer to like the stuff I've released under my own name. So yeah, ended up steering the project kind of in the last quarter of our development. Was shooting for this April release. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go in this radio show direction, and then started like basically building out the first episode. DM JC for P, he was down to like get on it, and sort of jumped in the way that I've enjoyed doing most of the things I've done, which is in a very sort of like improvised way, and then see where it goes. And so far, so good. Like I've been enjoying. We're four episodes in, 3 episodes more have been like recorded. So yeah, just gonna keep doing these weekly drops, basically.
How did the Farcon episode like come to be? Because that one was like there's a lot going on. Like that was, you've got others recorded, but maybe that one like sort of jumped in line to that, you sort of did it in advance.
Yeah, was planning to go to FarCon for a while. For like, yeah, it was like usually in the past I've always like FOMO'd into a conference last second.
Mm.
But FarCon was like an intentional one that I've been spending a lot of time on Farcaster this year, and I knew I wanted to go. I wasn't able to go last year in Venice. I don't think I went to any crypto conferences in all of 2024. So it was like my first time jumping into an IRL event in a while. And I knew I wanted to do something related to FarCon on acid test. Wasn't sure what exactly. And it was really once I was there that I was like, all right, I'm just going to start recording some of the conversations I have with people, and then I'll figure it out. I'll turn that into something. And so that basically became episode 3 of the show. And like, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to to record these conversations. I kind of wish I had a better mic than my iPhone, just like starting to hit voice memos, but I think it was still fun. You got kind of the DIY immersive sonics from that. But yeah, it was like it was just this other dimension of the trip, which I enjoyed it, and I really really enjoyed FarCon in general. So it was like a great trip, all in all.
And you mentioned like having more thoughts recently as to, given like sort of the information you've gotten from the launch and the reception and your feelings on it, and how things are going so far, you have ideas for what could be next. Is it, I don't know if I don't want to push you to share anything that you don't want to share, but just curious, sort of, there's always the post-launch sort of information that
For
comes
sure.
in that changes your perspective on things. And I'm curious how that's been for you.
Yeah, so there's been a few different like axes upon which I wanted to grow the thing, and now it might be a new one is presenting itself. So basically, the thoughts were even from the jump was like, okay, I could launch this way, and maybe I do still introduce like an acid test sort of artist component to the brand at some point. Another one was keep going in the curated music direction and actually launch like another sort of page in this app that is more the label side, and release some of this music as their own distinct or their own discrete mints of the songs that are being featured in the show.
Mm.
And then another one has been like, okay, like maybe actually this one has come more after doing a few episodes, which is like not something I had premeditated, but I'm actually like really enjoying doing these interviews. I'm sort of enjoying the podcast energy. And so maybe I start to distribute these, right now I'm just putting this out on the Acid Test mini app, but maybe I put these out in more podcast format across all channels, and keep growing it keep growing the show that I'm doing, but like, across more distribution channels than Farcaster. So those are sort of the different axes upon which I've been thinking about it. But now, most recently, the thing that I'm getting pulled to the most is, I guess, kind of back to the original idea for Acid Test, which is an on-chain native artist, to some extent. But basically, the thing that I was circling around but not doing, and basically haven't done since I got started with Songcamp, which is like make my own music, sort of bring it in first party to what I'm doing in crypto. And in some respects, I've like put my own music project on hold as I became a founder. And I'm now thinking most seriously that I think than I ever have about actually bringing these two things together, and trying that sort of energy again of doing interesting things that go deep with the crypto tech we have today for a musician. But instead of trying to launch this other parallel artist and sort of contrive a sound around it, do the thing that I do, with music. And so that's the thing I've been getting excited about now. And I don't know if that would live inside of Acid Test or just in parallel to it as its own thing. But yeah, kind of
Yeah, I
vague
mean,
so far, but that's the outline.
it sounds really interesting. Sounds like a pretty clean synthesis after like years of sort of separating the artist. Well, you sort of started as the artist and then became the builder, and never really brought them intimately together. But I sort of felt like even just by having Form as the first song on the first episode, that was somewhat doing that.
Yeah.
And you could definitely sort of like double and triple down on that and do more of it. But was there something is that one of your favorite songs of your own, or was there something that drew you to bringing that in as the first song? Because that was really like the early experience with the app was nice. Everything was like easy and looked nice and everything aesthetically. But then on the audio, when I started to hear that song, I was like, I had seen you around in the feed, and you know how it is like when you sort of like see someone from kind of afar and like you sort of have some assumptions or whatever, or you might not have any assumptions. But with you, I was like, oh yeah, seeing this guy in the feed, sort of had you in my head as like a founder. No
Yeah.
idea that, yeah, and I think I knew that you were like involved with music, but I didn't know that you yourself were an
Yeah.
artist. Like I thought you were
Yeah.
doing like a music business or something. And I mean, probably from Songcamp basically. And so I heard Form, and you like sort of introduced it as your song, and I was like, what? Like this is crazy. Like because it just, you can hear like sort of someone who's not someone who's just sort of dabbling. They might have a song like I've done this myself where it's, it's not super polished. And here this like intro song is just like unreal. And like I mentioned before we started recording, I go and I find it on Spotify and I was listening to it a bunch. And I really do want to, like, I need to, for whatever reason, I just sort of added that song to my like songs. And so I was just repeating that one rather than looking deeper. But I want to listen to like the album front to back and all of that. But I'm curious, was there something that sort of sprung Form into that position within like what it was inevitably going to be everyone's introduction was going to be episode one.
Mhm.
So it's a pretty
Yeah.
prominent placement. Was there, what was the thought behind that?
Yeah. Well, you're not the first person to say that also about like, it's funny, like even people who are very deep in the Songcamp community didn't know that I made music. Like, I mean, the people very deep in did, but people who are like involved in some of our camps, some of our projects didn't even know because they just like interface with me as this sort of founder, operator, community building person.
Right.
So yeah, a part of me, I guess, has been craving to those tear that down for a while. And I think with Acid Test, it's maybe come closest. And yeah, I guess I saw this. I was like, okay, here's a platform for me to contextualize some of my music in an interesting way that isn't just like, here's the song, press play, but like in this sort of radio show format. So yeah, kind of wanted to set the tone with that with my own music. And Form was chosen because, yeah, it is actually my favorite song of mine that I've written. I love the lyrics. I love the sonics of it. It's produced by Rabbit, he goes by Rabbit. His name is Jason Wu. He was my main collaborator in LA. Very talented producer and writer. And that was one of the last songs we wrote probably before I left LA when the pandemic hit, like the third to last or something song we wrote together. And it just like clicked in such a way. So it's always been a favorite of mine. And it was also the first song of mine that I put out on chain. It was the first song I minted on Catalog as a one of one, and the first song I had collected. So for those reasons, I led with it.
All right, I've got an interesting final question to wrap that is both practical and just maybe a thought that, a question you might not have been asked before. For someone, I'm coming in having listened to Form. I do think I listened to a couple more songs, but not like on repeat or whatever. So I'm basically coming in fresh, aside from Form. Other people might be in the same position. Thinking about your available music, if you're coming at it for the first time, how would you, assuming there's like, you don't have to sell someone, like they're motivated to get to know you as an artist, how would you approach your discography, in a sense? Like, what would you listen to, in what order, and how?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting to ask that to the artists themselves. I have such a deep context or relationship with the music, and maybe that makes it.
I will sort of preface it. It feels like an impossible question. I'm not under the illusion that that's like an easy question.
Right. No, it's like, maybe the best answer is like listen to the top, 5 that Spotify presents you, but that's definitely not how I would present it. My gut reaction is like, I would go listen to the Mathematics of Nature front to back, like in order.
Yeah.
Which is the album I put out
that's
in
what 2019. I will do. Yeah, I was definitely looking for the opposite of like, go listen to the top tracks.
Yeah, I would say listen to Mathematics of Nature. That's the closest thing I have to like basically a concept album. It's the thing that came out of that trip across the states and my first foray into LA. But and then if you're craving more, I think this is interestingly harder to find on my. You can find it, but it's not front and center as much as the Mathematics of Nature album will probably be on my Spotify. But if you find another project, I think it's under an EP called Textures of a Long Forgotten Assumption. It is basically many years later wrapping together the singles I put out during the pandemic. So basically all the music that I didn't put on my album or that I wrote after I released my album before leaving LA, probably in my mind actually has like the best music I made, because it was like just the most recent music I made in my most productive music or most prolific music period ever. So I think, and Form is actually on that like package of music. I won't even call it an EP.
I see. So Form, Tear, Sand, Red Balloons, Crazy Island.
Yeah. So those songs kind of to me are less a thread of like or less like a front to back like conceptual thing, as maybe the Mathematics of Nature is very intentionally ordered in this standalone project. That's just more of a compilation of, I think, very strong 6 or whatever songs. So that's
awesome. Well, I've got my marching orders. The Mathematics of Nature front to back looks like we've got 7 songs, and then Textures of a Long Forgotten Assumption. Awesome.
Simple names.
Because when I know the Textures of a Long Forgotten, I know you had said it, but I'm looking at it on my phone and I'm like, it doesn't even fit on the one line. You have to like click in it to expand it. But hey, it's, if you like the name, you like the name. And it's funny, the song names are incredibly short. The song names are like literally like 5 or 6 characters on average. Red Balloons throws it way off because there's 2 words and, a bunch of characters, but Sand, Tear, Form, Crazy Island. So interesting. Sort of opposite dynamic between the title and the song names, but yeah, excited to do that. It's always like, I don't know, I'm very sort of disappointed in a sense with the quality of music listening apps, as well as, I don't think about that quite as much, but with podcast apps as well, I just find them to be like, so podcast apps, I feel like there's so much low hanging fruit that is not as good as it could or should be. And then with
Mm.
music, it's like, I don't know, it's like very hard on Spotify even just to like know where to go outside of, I mean, obviously you can like pick an album or whatever, but it really features those like top 5 most popular songs, which is like usually not really what I want in terms of like getting an introduction to a new artist.
Yeah.
So this is a much better way to hear from the artist themselves. So appreciate that. Appreciate the time today. Excited to see where Acid Test goes from here and what you do, and hopefully not to sway you in one direction or another, but I just like the idea of sort of this synthesis of the founder or the builder and the artist, or the more creative side on the music front, and just continuing to, it seems like every step of the way you've just sort of followed what's interesting and sort of gone with the flow, and that's paid off extremely well so far. So excited to see where it continues to take you from here.
Man, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this chat. It's been a great conversation, and yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and have a great night.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks.